A Build Hatch developed production.
Hello, I'm Aaron Kyle and welcome to another episode of Build Hatch. On this week's episode of Build Hatch, I decided to sit down and have a genuine chat with someone I know pretty well, who has a first-hand view of the latest construction crisis emerging in our industry. That is the timber supply shortage. We need to do something about this issue right now, so watch what we are about to do. Mark is a well-grounded bloke who knows a lot about timber frames and trusses. His company supplies a lot of frames and trusses all over New South Wales. We've been posting a lot lately just what this impact is having on our industry. Timber isn't the only material that is creating problems on small businesses in construction. There are all sorts of superficial price gauging, fear-mongering, all these other examples that are going on, all alongside the genuine examples. Over the past few weeks, we have announced that we are putting the wheels in motion and putting together a third-party logistic and distribution framework that will allow greater buyer power and better prices for the Build Hatch community. Already, we have had over 20 suppliers and manufacturers who have reached out and offered to jump on board and look after our Build Hatch community. If you guys, that is the listeners, want to jump on board, please reach out, as we have hundreds of builders and tradespeople already who have reached out, responded over the past few weeks and want to jump on board. Like I said, this week's chat was a really insightful chat, and I appreciate Mark from Hunter Frame and Truss, who gave a very genuine and insightful view of the timber supply crisis going on in Australia right now. So let's get into it. All right, Mark, so welcome to Build Hatch. I brought you in here because you're someone that I know is very familiar with the construction industry. There's a lot of people hurting out there in the construction industry right now through a combination of fear-mongering or real actual supply and demand issues. There's a real crisis emerging in our construction industry. So I'll just state some facts and figures that I've taken out of doing my own research and what's actually going on in the industry right now, okay? So right now, Master Builders Association of Australia estimates that there are 70,000 construction workers and tradespeople living in 8 affected local government areas in Sydney. So these guys can't go to work. They can't leave their home to go to work. Unlike other lockdowns that we've had over the past 12 months, people have been able to leave their local area, go to work, and the building construction industry has been the backbone of the industry. Nothing against filling out a survey or lobbying our governments, but I've seen firsthand how difficult it is to try and get funding. By the time our politicians lobby the governments, the industry bodies, speak to their local members, it's too late. There's 70,000 subbies in Sydney right now who can't go to work. So it's literally a matter of life and death. I started the Build Hatch podcast and community as a way of giving back to the industry, right? So speaking of real stories, this is how real it gets. So that's the first thing. According to a recent Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman report, there are 2.3 million small businesses in Australia who contribute $418 billion to our economy. An astonishing 8% of that is generated from small construction businesses. Huge numbers. Small businesses make up between 97.4% and 98.4% of businesses in Australia. What's so interesting out of that is small business, and most of those, 41% of the workforce, are involved in construction small businesses, like huge numbers. That's how important the building construction industry is. So when I see firsthand the impacts of builders and subbies who they're being slowed down, they can't get their hands on materials and shortages, we're in real trouble here. What's scary about all of this is it's actually falling. When I access the Australian Bureau of Statistics, if I do a comparison for the last 6 months, the industry is actually slowing down. Year on year, it's actually slowing down. But everyone keeps saying it's a supply shortage. So what is the real story? I know I'm going on a bit, Mark, but what's your opinion on what's going on in the industry right now?
Well, I think we've got a bit of a perfect storm. We've got a lot of factors all coming together at once. And to me, it obviously got triggered with the COVID last year. When the COVID first came in, it was like, stop the presses, the world's going to stop. And a lot of builders that I know, I was getting phone calls from builders going, Mark, what's going on? I'm like, well, I don't know.
So when was this?
This is sort of March last year when the pandemic first really took hold.
Was it an instant thing, more or less, or did it take time?
No, it was just thinking back, it was probably for us. It was around that sort of March period. We'd been a little bit slow into the end of the 2019 as it was. Came back to 2020, slow to start as we always are out of Christmas. Just got going in Feb. March we had a decent month, and April it just dropped off the chart. We really had nothing.
So it slowed down. Like it nearly came to a halt.
100%. Like during that whole period, that was sort of 6 months from March through to September, I was at least 30 to 50% down on a monthly basis. I never had to I sent the boys home a couple of times just for a couple of days, but we were just scraping through. And without the help from the government, we would have gotten through, but it would have been tight.
So JobKeeper at the time kept things going.
Absolutely.
From there, what happened? Like as time went by?
So everybody that I spoke to was very on edge and not sure what's going to happen, and I couldn't pinpoint an actual moment. It was around about September somewhere, and it just snapped my fingers and it went, and all of a sudden.
So this is September 2020.
2020.
Some close 6 months or so after COVID.
Yep. And it was like all of a sudden there was quotes everywhere. There was jobs getting booked in hand over fist. And it was almost like I couldn't really connect anything that had happened externally to why it all of a sudden went.
What about the bushfires? Like people talk about Black Summer Bushfires, which goes back pre-COVID. So which is the data that I've looked at. So going back summer 2019.
Yep.
Sort of November, December in Australia through to January, February. That was sort of the bushfire period. Then we had COVID, which you've discussed, hit us in sort of March, April 2020. Yep. And then nothing really happened. It was sort of very slow until 6 months later in September. So so then what happened?
Well, first of all, we had the federal government obviously recognised that construction is a key part of the economy. So they introduced the incentives to get people motivated and get people building. And when they first introduced that, I personally thought to myself, I think they've sort of pulled the wrong rein here a little bit. I didn't think they'd actually targeted it correctly, but obviously it turned out to be very wrong because that just put a massive demand out there, and all of a sudden it exploded. And that's I put a lot of it down to that. But I think also there was a general feeling that people, certain stages of the pandemic, said, you know what, we just got to get on with this. I know myself personally, I had days I was sort of doubting it and just wondering what was going to happen next and where we're going to go. But then I sort of said to myself one day, you know what, let's just get on with it. And we got on with it.
Adapt and accept it.
Yeah, you've got to work with the cards you're dealt, don't you? So that sort of decision I made, personally. And the business kept rolling along. It was going okay, but then once we started to get a little bit more work and the work started to flow back in and people started to feel good, and all of a sudden it was sort of almost back to normal. And that was, and for us, September was like, hallelujah, we're back, and that rush is sort of sustained right through to now.
And that's pretty consistent with my data that I've had a look at. Yes, there was a bit of a pause. Yes, there was an injection. If you even it all out, it's a pretty consistent year in terms of turnover. That's according to the government's own data, which talks about new dwelling approvals, and that for a statistician, that's probably the most accurate way of working out how many new houses are going into council, getting approved, and turning into construction. That's sort of how they look at the data. One of the things everyone throws into it, and I've briefly mentioned already, is the Black Summer Bushfire. So we're recording this in the Hunter Valley, so I guess we've got a lot of affected bushfire country all around this area, really, to the north, to the south. So you didn't find any sort of impact from that?
The bushfires impacted the timber industry to some degree, yes.
But that was more the plantations.
The plantations, yeah. It didn't affect us directly as a major supplier wasn't affected. So it didn't really have an impact on me personally. But yeah, it was certainly a contributing factor in the overall timber shortage that we're experiencing at the moment. Explain
to me, like, you're quite a large company. You deal with a lot of Newcastle, Hunter Valley, north and south, all the areas in between. So, like, where do you get your pine timber from?
So our pine timber comes from Oberon.
So Oberon's sort of slightly north inland, New South Wales?
So it's sort of south of Bathurst, just over the Blue Mountains. It's in the high country there, so cold country, so good country for growing pine. But yeah, we did have a couple of different mills as suppliers, but we actually changed not that long before, actually during the COVID period, changed to one supplier and aligned ourselves with them. And luckily we aligned ourselves with the right supplier because we have maintained steady supply through this whole problematic time.
So everyone's talking about they can't get their hands on timber, and I've seen firsthand. I've seen guys that have supported local businesses for 15 years. When one of the big players has turned up in their car in their ute, giving out their business card to say, look, come over to us, we'll supply your timber. Those guys have sort of said, no, I've been supporting my local business. Same with hardware, same with timber and trusses, and then yet what I've seen the big guys now go to those guys and say, well, here's a purchase order for $2 million worth of material for the year. I'll go with you in return. You guarantee my business, basically. So, how's it impacting you, and how are you able to supply timber where other people are struggling to do so?
I have an allocation, so I have to manage it very carefully.
Was there an allocation before this shortage material sort of crisis?
No, the allocation's only been in for a couple of months. Prior to that, I was limited in what I could buy, and what I essentially did was I said, okay, well, I was got a massive demand out there, and got to remember we were essentially ramped down during the COVID period, right? So we backed it off. We let some casual staff go. We didn't replace staff, natural attrition. When the boom came, it was really difficult to ramp it back up. So we got there slowly, and I was just slowly pegging more timber. I was buying more timber as we kept going up and up and up until my timber supplier said, no, that's enough.
Yeah. You're starting to put a bit too many orders in.
We're too much. So we brought it back, and for me it meant that we had to pull back our overtime because we were charging along doing overtime, trying to get as much done as keep as many people happy as we could. So we just had to pull that back, which has then had the effect of pushing our lead times out as well. So everything has a different reaction. So
now there's a lot of theories out there, and from what I can tell, and I've done some research into this, a lot of the timber pine plantations are owned by a mixture of government and old established sort of family businesses. So what's stopping people buying directly from those guys?
My understanding is that nearly all the plantation timber is state forest in New South Wales. I'm not sure about other states, but it's state forest.
It's about 75% nationwide.
Yep.
So wherever the plantations are, 75% of those, roughly speaking, differs state by state, are owned by state governments.
Yeah, and so the state owns them. And then the actual timber companies, they are essentially given some kind of allocation, for want of a better word, that they're allowed to log that area. And then that's the private company that comes in and purchases off the state government. So
that's right. They basically have contracts in play that, and the way it's designed to, I guess, evolve and take shape is that obviously there are certain allocations of timber that are growing and maturing, and it's obviously a juggling act that there's not more timber being extracted versus pine plantations that are maturing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you can't just go and mill everything at once. There'll be nothing in the future. So it's a finite resource. You've got to manage it.
That's right. From what I could tell, a pine tree takes about 9 years to sort of mature to a point that they can actually log it.
Yep.
Are there any other species that you're seeing, like people trying to produce timber out of, or?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I believe slash pine, which is grown in sort of the hotter states like Queensland, I believe it grows faster, but the grain's not as dense. It's not as quality pine, for want of a better word. But yeah, nothing else that I'm aware of other than the imported stuff, I guess.
Going back to my facts and figures, I mean, I've looked at the HIA's recent publication, backs up what I've been saying all along, right? So this is where it gets interesting. So in June 2021 quarter for new homes, it was reported 11% higher than the same time in 2019. So they consider that a normal year when they compare year on year. So they're HIA's words, not mine. So that quarterly result is also on par with the same quarter in 2018, which is also a strong year for detached home building. They then go on to talk about some other things, strength of home sales not actually occurring evenly across the states. I guess that's where the imbalance lies, because New South Wales increased by 36%, closely followed by WA with 35%, but Queensland, they only grew, these are single home figures, Queensland only grew 4% compared to the June quarter in 2019, while Victoria is the standout, which was actually down by 0.1%. So if you're a Victorian builder, and South Australia was actually worse, it was down by 14.4% year on year. Wow. So if you're a home builder or you're a builder, you're supplying frames and trusses, like how tough is it to supply these to the market? The figures are sort of saying there's some increases in those standout states, which is WA and New South Wales. How do these price increases affect your business? And have you seen, explain the process of how these price hikes have sort of travelled throughout that period?
So the pricing for us, timber is usually very stable, and timber is obviously our major component of our product. It's usually very stable, and it only changes by small percentages. It only changes, might be once every 6 months, 12 months. I think we actually went for a stage. I don't think we had a price change for a couple of years. Therefore, we can be very stable with our pricing.
And how's it measured? Like what metric? Is it a linear metre rate?
Yeah, linear metre. Linear metre, cubic metre. Most people are talking linear metres. You can sort of go both ways. It depends what it is. Some products tend to talk in cubic and others in linear metre, but I prefer linear. It's easier for everybody to grasp. Yeah, so the pricing is usually very stable. So that means that our customers, they know they can rely on our price to stay the same. We give a price from 6 months ago and we can hold it usually. What's happened through this period is that we've seen pricing from the start of the year to now. I've got one particular engineered wood product supplier, 67% increase.
67%.
67%.
So this is for commonly known as LVL timbers.
Yep.
Yeah, 67%.
67%. And I heard a whisper today that's proposed 25% for later on in the year. So, you put
which is crazy, isn't it?
Huge numbers, mate. Huge numbers. Our pine pricing has gone something, I don't know the exact figure, but it's roughly around 30 to 35. So this is what's happened. I've got one supplier that they have a very big range. They normally have a nice, pretty price book, and it has the pictures and it has all the stock lengths and all the information you need about every product. They've given up on that. They just send us a spreadsheet every month now. That's how often the pricing changes. So obviously, I can't wear that every time.
No one can.
No, you'll be out the door. So we've just got to pass these increases on wherever we can. So that affects the builder. Okay, so I guarantee my quotes for 30 days. Well, I did. I now guarantee them for 7 days during this period. But the builder, they're the ones usually in some kind of fixed price contract, and they're the ones that they've got the biggest issue, and that's where I think a lot of builders are going to find themselves in some serious problems.
Well, this is part of the problem, and it's no disrespect to the suppliers. We're not talking about those people. What we're talking about is these significant price increases from all reported statistics, from all available data that I can find, and I'll happily be proven wrong if anyone listening to this wants to give me something that I've missed or haven't looked into. But I'm pretty passionate about it. I've looked into it. COVID's obviously been thrown in the mix, and Black Summer Bushfires. What was interesting, the government did inject some stimulus into the industry, but the timber is there. It's there to be extracted. And yes, there's increased labour costs and all the other stuff, but I just can't fathom how it can go up 67%. And full disclosure, you and I have done business before and I've bought timber from you, but this isn't just you. This is also impacting the plasterers that buy gyprock. It goes all the way, you mentioned it, flows all the way down into the builder. I know right now that there are large, major players in the residential construction market, specky builders who are building, anything from 50 houses above per year. These guys are handing back contracts because they go in pretty tight, make a tight margin. They might be making 7 to 10% per project. They have a supervisor, which is quite alarming, but one supervisor generally looks after 25 houses. That's how tight they are. And they're giving back contracts because everything from the Portaloo costs have gone up as well.
Yep.
Like, you do the sums with fuel and people, labour costs, all that sort of stuff, but to the point that the Portaloo's going up 15%. And people are getting emails, like you said, spreadsheets saying, this month or this quarter, the prices are going up X amount of dollars, and it just doesn't make sense. So that's part of why I wanted to get you on the show, to be able to talk to you, because you know how it all works. You're giving it your best, having a go, supplying timber, frames and trusses to as many areas as you can.
Yeah.
And I take my hat off to you because it's a tough industry. It's just, according to the data, it just doesn't add up. So here's what I'm sort of getting the Build Hatch community to do is put together a distribution channel, a logistics sort of distribution network where, and I've already had people jump on board who want to make a pledge to be able to serve the Build Hatch community, to be able to give them and deliver a service that has no bullshit price increases, no exorbitant price increases, no major price fluctuations and lead times when secretly you can see one of the bigger builders who didn't use them before this COVID crisis, they're now delivering them and using them. So that's what I'm sort of doing. I'm putting together an exclusive network of people that will be able to, call it a cooperative or whatever you like. It's basically lobbying the people that actually supply these materials. We're not going to wait and sit back for a politician. We're going to go straight to the manufacturers to say, here's a building and construction community of people that kept this country afloat basically during the building construction industry. I've seen it firsthand where builders, even yourself running a business with the check-ins, the QR codes, the social distancing, everything else, it's just added more costs and slowed productivity down to your business.
Absolutely. Everything has a cost. Even when in the Hunter we went into lockdown last Friday, so we're going to send staff home. So I've got to run around and buy dongles so they can get onto Wi-Fi networks. I've got to buy extra monitors. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And, it's all money. It's not massive money for me. I'm one of the lucky ones. My business is still going. I really feel for some of the businesses that literally can't operate right now. But it's all money and it's all cost. It's got to go somewhere.
100%. So big special thanks to Mark here from Hunter Frame and Trusses, you've taken some time out of your day. We've caught up. I wanted to get your input and your opinion on how the industry is, and this is the real deal. This is exactly what's going on. We need to get together, get behind this sort of movement, if you like. If you're a supplier, you listen to this and you want to jump on board, reach out via our socials. If you're a builder and you want to have a fair income chat, or you're building in this area and Mark's the guy to come talk to, and he won't let you down, unlike some other people that are just being irresponsible and creating all sorts of fluctuated conditions, and it's not right. So anyway, thanks for coming on to Build Hatch, Mark. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, Aaron.
Well, that was another Build Hatch episode with myself and Mark from Hunter Frame and Truss. Like I said, stay tuned for some exciting announcements that are coming online over the next few weeks. We certainly have a lot of active plans going on in the background, so stay tuned. And if you want to find out more, feel free to get into touch with us. As usual, please check out our Instagram page and other socials, including our YouTube channel, where you'll be able to learn more about our guests and the features of the work that we talk about. Some exciting things coming up, so stay tuned. Have a great week, and you'll hear me again on the airwaves next week. Thanks for listening to another episode of Build Hatch.
You have experienced a Build Hatch developed production.